Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Draw. Thank you for taking the time to join and listen. Please follow along and subscribe on all of our platforms, whether it's Spotify, YouTube, Instagram. We're on all of them, Apple Podcasts. I do appreciate the support. If you enjoy it, please like, comment, share, let your friends know. We'll be here every week. This week we've got 4 tournaments to preview. All of the draws are out as of now. We don't have betting for any of them, so I will be back with a segment to clip onto this tomorrow before we post with the betting part of it. But I have gone through the draw. I have had a look at each of them. We have Barcelona for the men, which is a 500, and then Munich, which is a 250. And on the women's side, we have the same pattern. We have Stuttgart, which is a 500, and we have Rouen in France, which is the 250. So we'll spend more time on the 500s and a quick look at the 250s. But maybe before we start, a quick look back at the week gone by in Monte Carlo for the men and in Linz for the women. So the finals have been set in both. I'm recording this in Denver on a Saturday. Tomorrow we're going to have Sinner Alcaraz. Both of them have just been too good, sublime. We said on the pod last week, if you were going to take one of the big two, it would have to be Alcaraz at the prices. Alcaraz is favourite in the final. I expect Alcaraz will probably win, but Sinner was incredible today against Zverev. Any of the long shots we put up, they didn't really have a hope with this level. Kind of the hope was that Sinner would be vulnerable coming in from playing a month on the hard courts in the Sunshine Double, where he went back to back. Didn't transpire that way. He did drop a set to Thomas Mashak, so maybe something there could have happened, but Cerundolo went out a little bit earlier. Casper Ruud withdrew against Felix with an injury, so it worked out pretty well for Sinner. And then obviously he did have to come through a harder section than Alcaraz. Alcaraz ended up, his matches were Baez, Echeverry, Bublik and Vachereau to make the final. So that's the whole reason that you bet Alcaraz instead of betting Sinner, who had to play Humbert, Mashak, Felix Auger and Zverev. So a much harder route. So fully justified in saying that the Sinner price was poison at plus 105. Stand over that, and he's bigger than that tomorrow. So he's a bigger price in the final than you could have backed him pre-tournament, which tells you all you need to know about the pre-tournament price. I think Alcaraz will win. I just think he's fresher and maybe been hitting on clay for a week longer than Sinner. But honestly, if Sinner plays the level he was today, he'll be very hard to beat. I just think Zverev is a nice matchup for Sinner, though. The story of that tournament is honestly Vachereau, just unbelievable. He's from Monte Carlo. A year or two ago, he was outside the top 100. Went on a crazy run and won ATP Shanghai on a hard court back in China. Now, there's a difference between winning Shanghai for a player like him and making the semi-final on clay in Monte Carlo. Shanghai is the fastest court that there is on tour. He's a huge server, beautiful hands and volleys. It makes more sense to me that he could go on a run and win Shanghai than what he just did here in Monte Carlo, making the final and knocking out the players that he did. He beat Musetti. Musetti was probably my favourite bet of the week for a quarter market. But Vachereau beat him in a tight one, 7-6, 7-5. Then he beat Hurkacz. Then he beat Alex de Minaur. So he really played some top players. And honestly, Musetti wasn't that bad. I watched that match and Musetti was not that bad. Vachereau just played a really high level and stuck in and was gritty. For a big guy to move that well, it's massively impressive. Alcaraz took care of him relatively easily today, but you would expect that. But yeah, look, that was Monte Carlo. I'm really interested. I don't have a position on it. I'm really interested to watch the final tomorrow, and I definitely will. I think Alcaraz will probably win, but it could be a classic. WTA Linz, one of our bets pulled out before the tournament, so that would have been money back. That was Sarah Bejlek. She pulled out nursing an injury. And then the other one was Anastasia Potapova, and we're on her at 33-1 each way. She plays the final tomorrow, so the 16-1 or the plus 1650 place money if you backed each way is already in the bank. I know obviously that's probably not available to a lot of US listeners, so anyone riding that in the US will be hoping she can beat Mira Andreeva tomorrow. I do think that's a very tough ask for her to beat Andreeva. Andreeva didn't really put a foot wrong all week and has looked great. Now that said, Potapova has looked great as well, particularly in the quarterfinal against Tagger. Second set was a bagel. Today she destroyed Vekic, and Vekic has looked pretty good. So she's not coming in here without a hope. Her backhand is excellent, but I just think Andreeva's probably the next level up. I would say follow along on Instagram and YouTube for the reels and shorts and stories that I put out midweek. I did put up that I thought Potapova was a super price to beat Tagger in the quarterfinal. The market went up with a pick and then money moved towards Tagger and it made no sense. I thought it was $1.60 kind of shot for Potapova. It's maybe a 75th, 80th percentile backhand that Potapova has versus Tagger, who I think is arguably protecting her backhand and needs to protect it a little bit. It's that one-handed, but it doesn't look that clean, and I think it's vulnerable. And Potapova, the first set was tight, it was a tie break, and then Potapova destroyed her 6-love. So I think that was an incredible bet. I think it went off 2.20 or plus 120, something in that region, which I thought was a super bet, and did mention that on all of the platforms. So again, another reason to follow along and listen in throughout the week. We will do that where we find some value. So really looking forward to that from the perspective of being on Potapova in the final and having obviously the payout at 33 at plus 3,300. There was also bigger price than that once the qualifiers went in and the bottom section got some of the really good names like Pliskova and Vekic and so on. She did actually drift to plus 5,000. So there may be some people who bet her at plus 5,000, but we're in a good spot there. So hopefully another winner for the pod. But yeah, even if not, she's in a final. You can hedge, you can do whatever you want in that final potentially. But given the price or whatever, I would just say let her ride and hope that she can beat Andreeva. But it is a tough ask, I would say. Let's before we start into this week's tournaments, I wanted to have a really quick look at kind of way too early French Open look aheads. And I'm not going to spend any time here, but there are a couple of prices that are worth taking this early for small stakes at large prices. On the men's side, actually, it's Sinner. He's the only value. He's plus 160, and I think that's value. He'll go off basically a pick'em with Alcaraz. I think they'll both go off in the region of plus 110, something like that. It will depend on the draw, who gets Djokovic, who gets Zverev, etc. But plus 160 is lovely, and that's going to shorten all the way into plus 100 or plus 110 before the tournament. And then on the women's side, a couple of bigger outsiders that are all worth betting. Karolina Mukova is plus 4,000. Jess Pagula, coming off a Charleston title, is plus 5,000. Marketa Vondrousova, who is a former finalist at the French and really dangerous on clay when she's healthy, really dangerous on clay, Wimbledon champion as well. She knows how to bring it in the slams. She's plus 8,000. And Iva Jovic is about the same price, plus 7,000, plus 8,000. And she looked really good, I thought, in Charleston. She could win a slam in the next 2 or 3 years, given the level that we've seen so far this season. So that was a really quick section, but a couple of bets there that I thought were great. One on the men's side, Sinner, and then those longer shots on the women's side. They're all going to go off shorter than they are right now. So, worth small stakes this early in the season. Let's move on and let's dive straight into this week. So we're going to start with the men. We have Barcelona as the first tournament up. So let me pull the draw open in front of me. I do have some notes here. So Alcaraz is in the draw. I think it doesn't really even matter whether he wins tomorrow or loses in Monte Carlo. Alcaraz is the big name here. He's a two-time champ. He did lose to Holger Rune in the final last year. When you think about it now, it seems like a crazy result, but I do remember seeing the picture of or the video of Rune diving into the pool. They have the tradition in Barcelona, the defending champion dives into the pool and the ball kids follow them in, which is kind of cool. I remember Nadal used to be so elegant. He has a boat or had a boat and well used to water growing up in the island, and he always had the elegant proper dive into the pool. And then you see most of the other lads who have won it, Nishikori and Ruud and Rune, and they're just diving in, they're jumping in, holding their feet like someone not having the levels of confidence around water that Nadal obviously had. But I do remember Nishikori jumping in the year he won, and he was a player I used to love watching, particularly on clay actually. So he had a title here in Barcelona. But this is a great tournament. Players love to come and play it. It's a real tennis club. It's not like some of these tournaments where they go and it's not really a club like Miami that was in Hard Rock Stadium, for example. This is a real tennis club. Players love coming back and playing it. The crowd is really tightly knit, really close in. I will get there someday and watch it in person, but I love this tournament. Yeah, Alcaraz is the class of the field. I'm not going to waste any time. He's in with Rublev in the quarter. It depends if Alcaraz is tired or how fatigued he is, whether or not he runs through the draw here and wins again. I think given he's under a bit of pressure from Sinner for the race for number one, Alcaraz has a lot of points to defend and Sinner has way less. Alcaraz will be motivated to go ahead and try and win here, and I think he will win here. So it's not probably great from an outright betting perspective, but as always, we'll have a look at the bottom half where there might be some bad each way, and stay away from Alcaraz in the top. But I think he'll be comfortable enough. Mariano Navone is in there, Baez is in there, and Rublev. One of them will play Alcaraz in the quarterfinal. I think it'll be comfy for Carlos. Then the second quarter, some qualifiers yet to be played, so you wouldn't know if you got a Pablo Carreno Busta in as a qualifier or a lucky loser, someone like that who has won this title before, I think, or certainly made a final before. He will be dangerous here, but other than that, you've got Echeverry, Alex de Minaur, and Jack Draper. Look, Clay is Draper's worst surface, it goes without saying. He has had some injury trouble, so I would be probably swerving him here. de Minaur looked okay in Monte Carlo. He wasn't terrific by any stretch, and obviously lost to Vachereau, and is a significant step down in terms of level from Carlos. And then Echeverry, one of those three again will come up and play Alcaraz in the semis, I would say. And we'll keep an eye on the prices there. If you got a big price on Echeverry, he'd probably be worth siding with. He looked pretty good in Monte Carlo. And then the bottom half is where it kind of gets a little bit more interesting. And I do have two names standing out here that I want to, wait and get a price on, and particularly keen to get a price on one of them. So the third quarter is Cam Norrie and Karen Khachanov as the seeds. Norrie was fine in Monte Carlo. He ended up losing in 3 sets to de Minaur. And then Khachanov has been struggling a little. I think he lost to Fonseca in the first round in Monte Carlo and came out and, had tons of praise for Fonseca. So the name here that's standing out to me, and sorry, Wawrinka's in there too, it's his swan song in Barcelona. He's getting wildcards into a lot of these tournaments, which is great to see for a former French Open champion and a former great and a former, Monte Carlo champion and just a super player. He's getting all the respect he deserves. I think he's 41 years old, so he's still playing at a decent level. He plays Cam Norrie in the first round. But the name that stands out here to me, and I'm hoping goes under the radar a little when they're pricing tomorrow or tonight, is Rafael Hodar, the Spaniard. So he is a live wire. If anybody doesn't know him, probably plenty of you won't know him. Go and look him up. There is a chance that this is the guy who is the biggest threat to Sinner and Alcaraz in the next 3 or 4 years. He won ATP Marrakesh on his last start 2 weeks ago. He barely dropped a set. He dropped one set to Thomas Mashak, and the other sets were just obliterating everybody around him. He was incredible. That's his first title. He's come up, basically it's his first year on tour, and he's immediately won a title. But he could go up at a price here, and I will definitely be keen, particularly if you can get each way and back him each way, so you don't have to end up beating Alcaraz. But there could be name the finalist markets that will be interesting with him, quarter 3 winner markets that will be interesting with him. I expect he'll be third in the betting for this quarter after Norrie and Khachanov, and that sounds like a good spot to be. So very, very keen to keep an eye on Rafael Hodar and see what we get there. And then quarter 4 is actually pretty stacked, honestly, for a tournament. Like the top half is relatively straightforward. The bottom half is actually quite stacked. You've got in quarter 4, you've got Vachereau, you've got Arthur Fils, you've got Corentin Moutet, Martin Landelus, who had the really nice run in the US, and then you've got Lore Musetti as the bottom seed. Musetti is a super player. I waxed lyrical about him on the pod last week. Okay, he didn't do himself justice in Monte Carlo, but he was not bad. He played 2 really tight sets with Vachereau. He wasn't entered here in Barcelona, and after he lost early in Monte Carlo, he decided to enter here. I think he needs the match practice. He wants to get back to form. He obviously had some time off, but he's a top player on clay. He's definitely a top 5 player on clay. We spoke about his accomplishments on clay on last week's pod. Depends how quickly he gets his form back, whether or not he comes through this section. But the name that stands out to me, and sorry, I do think that Vachereau will have some element of fatigue and a mental come down from, he had all the crowd behind him in Monte Carlo. He's in the final 4 with Alcaraz, Sinner and Zverev. This is something of a little wake up call, or maybe a drop back down to earth. So I don't expect Vachereau to continue in the vein of form he was in. Arthur Fils is the one for me here that I really want to keep an eye on. Fils had the quarterfinals in Indian Wells, the semi-finals in Miami. Prior to that was the final in Doha, and then on clay he made the semi-final here in Barcelona last year and the quarterfinal in Monte Carlo, and he lost both of them to Alcaraz. So we know he lost some time with injury, but since he's come back in the golden swing, he has been phenomenal. Obviously made the final in Doha, prior to that I also mentioned. I think he lost to Alcaraz there as well. He took a week off last week, which I love to see. He's going to be coming in here fresh. So for me, it's him and Musetti down here. I would be very interested to see what the prices are. You could argue that Musetti should still be favourite just with his previous accomplishments on clay, but Musetti's form is still not exactly where he needs to be. He's probably 80% of where he would expect to be, or what his peak is, whereas Feast looks very, very close to his best. So I think that could be a really good matchup here. It is set up to be a quarter final, provided they both win out all the way. And I think either of them would beat Rafael Hodar in the semis. But those three are the names down in the bottom for me: Arthur Fils, Lore Musetti, and Rafael Hodar. So you could get big prices on some of those. We will definitely check back here tomorrow. Overall, I think Alcaraz probably gets the win, but he's not someone I'd be looking to lump on at a minus 150 or minus 200 type price outright. I think he certainly has his challenges here. Okay, he doesn't really have any in the top half that I can see, but there are names in the bottom half, namely Arthur Fils and Lore Musetti, who could trouble him potentially in a final. And you have to remember, Alcaraz is coming in off a full week all the way a run to the final in Monte Carlo before this. So that's Barcelona previewed. Quick drink. Let's move on and take a look at the other men's tournament, which is Munich, and this is a 250. So yeah, it's another one that I think the draw is relatively well split in. You have the big name in the top, which is Alex Zverev, and then in the bottom you have a couple of decent names. Ben Shelton is the second seed. I'm pretty sure the finalist here last year, or the final here last year, was Zverev and Shelton. Zverev over Shelton. So you have the 1 seed and the 2 seed back again to defend their title and final spots. I think Zverev has a chance of coming in tired here too. I also feel like sometimes when Zverev takes a step down to a 250 level, and he obviously is German, and I think he could be even from Munich, or maybe it's Hamburg, but he's German, he's going to have the crowd. That's probably why he's here. He's probably getting a hefty fee to be here. Sometimes I question the buy-in of a player like him, who's just come from a semi-final in Monte Carlo and will already be eyeing up Madrid, followed by Rome, followed by Roland Garros. I don't know if he's going to be fully bought in here, and almost automatically I want to avoid him and I want to take him on. There are a couple of players, like he has Miomir Kesmanovic in the first round, he has Botic van de Janschkulp and Francisco Cerundolo all in his quarter. I spoke a lot about Cerundolo last week on the pod. He had a easy win over Tsitsipas in the first round, and then he lost in the second round. I am very keen again on Cerundolo. He's a player where you won't have that same problem that you may have with Zverev. It's like, is he bought in? Is he not? This is a clay court tournament. Cerundolo is bought in, so I am keen to keep an eye on him here. But Botic is a 2-time runner-up in this tournament, and Botic also made a semi-final recently in Bucharest, where he lost to the eventual winner Mariano Navone 7-5 in the third. So you do have a form player here in Botic van de Janschkulp. He is in the same little section of this quarter as Cerundolo, so Zverev will only have to go through one of them, but that's not an easy quarter final for Zverev. The second quarter is honestly pretty weak. You've got Flavio Cioboli, who won ATP Acapulco on hard but hasn't done anything on clay. And then you have Luciano Darderi, who is the best clay courter in that section. He is the 6th seed here and the second seeded player in that section. I don't really see much else. Fuchsovics, Bergs, Vitko Priva. There's not a lot of danger in there. Darderi will be the one I see coming out of this into the semi-finals. He has a final in Buenos Aires this year, and he has a title in Santiago. So, he's a good player, but he didn't play well in Marrakesh, and he didn't really play that well in Monte Carlo either. So I think the dangers here for Zverev are in his own quarter, as opposed to worrying about Darderi. In the bottom half, then you don't have the same big name as Zverev, but you do have a ton of players in there. For me, I think the section 3 is actually quite weak, even though there are a couple of bigger names in there. You've got Griekspoor, you've got Shapovalov, Tsitsipas, Cilic, and Bublik. They've all got problems. I can make arguments against all of them. Griekspoor is coming in on a terrible run of form. He lost to Monfils in Monte Carlo. This is 2026. You can't be losing to Monfils on clay. He lost in round 1, I think, in Marrakesh as well. Yeah, he did. He lost to Van Asch in Marrakesh. Terrible loss. So, look, Grietzboer is actually a player I really like, and he's a very good clay courter. He's a really, really good player, the Dutchman, but I can't have him on his current run of form. I think he'll also be quite favoured in the betting, so an easy swerve. Shapovalov awful on clay. Marozan, he's fine, but he doesn't have the level to trouble the good guys. And Tsitsipas, just form. Easy one for me to draw a line through. He's done well here in the past, I think, but he lost to Cerundolo last week, and then if you go back the game before that he played Arthur Fils in Miami, and he lost 6-love 6-1 in about an hour. So I think Tsitsipas's form is awful, and I think he's a shadow of himself. Daniel Altmaier is in here too, and Alexander Bublik. So Bublik is the seed, and he did okay in Monte Carlo. He made it all the way through to play Alcaraz, and I think, clay is obviously his worst surface. He made sure to let Alcaraz know at the net. I think they shook hands after Alcaraz blew him out 3-love. And he said, "Oh, you've played me on my worst surface," which I didn't think was that gracious. But to be fair, he's right. And I think if they played on grass, Bublik is a danger to anyone on grass if he's serving out of his mind, the touch and the hands and so on. So that's probably fair. But I don't really like him on clay. That said, if he's engaged here, it's hard to see who beats him in this section. It's pretty weak. Down the bottom is Arthur Rinderknech and Ben Shelton. Rinderknech is Valentin Vachereau's cousin, which is interesting. Little claim to fame there. Those two played in a big final. I can't remember what the tournament was, but they played in a big final. It actually could have been Shanghai. Crazy that two first cousins are playing each other in a Masters 1000 final. And then Ben Shelton is the other name. So Shelton, for me, he made the final here last year, but usually he's short in the betting odds. We don't have any odds, so we can't necessarily speak to it right now. But I think he'll be favoured. He's an easy swerve usually for me on clay, particularly when there's a name in here like João Fonseca, which there is. Fonseca's not seeded. He has a very tough opener with Alejandro Tabilo. Tabilo is a lovely clay courter. He has won titles. Fonseca lost in the quarterfinal of Monte Carlo just this week to Zverev in 3 sets. He is coming into form. He has played and lost to Alcaraz, Sinner and Zverev, I'm pretty sure, in his last 3 tournaments. But, he looks good. He looks back to himself. He's at home on clay. I think Fonseca is the real danger here, and I'll be definitely keen to see what way the bookies price up this quarter. Shelton, you could argue, deserves to be favoured. He has a lucky loser or a qualifier first, and then Hanfmann or Alexander Bloch second, whereas Fonseca has Tabilo, followed by maybe Mikkelsen or Rinderknech. So Shelton will probably be favoured, but I could definitely see and almost expect Fonseca to beat Shelton on clay. So we'll see how that one looks. But overall for the tournament, look, I'm probably actually trying to take on both seeds here, the 1 and 2 seed, which is Zverev, and last year's finalists as well, and runner-up Shelton. And we're going to try to do it probably in the top with either Botic van de Zandschulp or Francisco Cerundolo, and then most likely Fonseca in the bottom. But we'll see. Again, I'll come back to it once the betting is out, and I'll clip it onto the end here. Let's move on to the women's before I sign off for today. So we'll spend a little bit more time on Stuttgart than we do on Rouen. Stuttgart is a 500, and I'm excited for this. I'm actually more excited for this than I am for Barcelona. This is a really, really good draw. Really good players here. Let's get into it. It's also pretty much a balanced draw. Like, the big 2 names are in the top, but also you've got a player like Coco Gauff and Karolina Mukova down in the bottom. So it's not by any means weak. So it's a pretty balanced draw. Elena Rybakina is the 1 seed, and in that top quarter with her you've got Jasmine Paolini, Diana Schneider and Alexandra Ela. Rybakina on clay, again, it's probably her weakest surface, but she's such a good player. She can play on any surface, and especially if you are going to put her on clay, her best chance is indoors, obviously, where there's no wind to contend with or weather. So she serves huge, she plays huge. She's going to have a chance here. She is the 2024 champ at this tournament, so she has won it before, and she has a title on clay last season as well in Strasbourg. So not a stranger to clay. Not necessarily someone I would be looking to bet as a favourite on clay, but let's see what the prices are again when we come back tomorrow, and we'll decide whether we're taking her on or not. Just in terms of the quarter, Alexandra Ela, I think she's a good player, but she had a loss to Ostapenko last week in Linz. Leila Fernandez is in there, Diana Schneider. I don't think any of them are good enough to take on or challenge Rybakina. Schneider actually arguably has the best chance. And then Jasmine Paolini, who we've all seen incredibly, like she made a Roland Garros final, she made a Wimbledon final directly after it. So she does have the level, but her form has been appalling. Just like a ton of losses. She maybe is starting to come around a little bit, but I would want to see it before I start backing her and probably take her for Rome or something like that when it comes around, if her form is turned. For now, unless the price is crazy, I have no interest in Paolini. So to me it looks hard to oppose Rybakina in quarter one, but we'll check back tomorrow with the prices. Quarter two then is really interesting. So you have three big names here. You have the two seeds, Iga Swiatek and Mira Andreeva, and then along with that you have Jelena Ostapenko. The head-to-head between Ostapenko and Swiatek is 5-0 for Ostapenko. Like there's nobody that Swiatek wants to avoid more than Jelena Ostapenko. Now the problem is Ostapenko has Mira Andreeva in round one, so that's a blockbuster matchup. You wonder, would fatigue come into it a little bit? Andreeva takes on Potapova in the final tomorrow in Linz, so I wonder, is she going to be tired if that's like a Tuesday match against Ostapenko? There are no round one buys, so I imagine it could be a Tuesday match for those. So there is a chance there that Ostapenko upsets. And if Ostapenko upsets and plays Swiatek does not want to play Ostapenko. She's never beaten her in 5 attempts. Just the matchup does not suit. That said, Swiatek has been working with Francisco Roig at Rafa Nadal's academy in Mallorca for the past week. She's hitting with Rafa. She's basically getting lessons from Rafa. I've seen videos. I've seen the practice. I've seen the reaction of other pros on the WTA, and they're like, shit, we did not need this. The last thing we needed was Iga teaming up with Rafa. So Francisco Roig was like, partnered with Tony Nadal for years, helping Rafa and in the camp. And he's basically the main guy at the Nadal Academy with Tony Nadal. Interestingly, he was coaching Giovanni and Pesci Pericard up to like 2 weeks ago and never told him, Pesci Pericard, that he was dumping him for Swiatek. But all of a sudden showed up on socials and it was like, here, this is Swiatek's new coach. It's Francisco Roig. And Pericard didn't know and nobody told him. And then his agent eventually told him and he was disgusted, which I can completely understand. I would rather be with Swiatek than Pericard, especially coming into a clay season, but any surface really, but especially clay. So I fully expect Swiatek to be entirely revitalized here. I actually think she's going to go and win the title and look incredible. I usually don't like backing Swiatek on clay because I always think she's too short relative to the other good girls, and she's not overrated because she's incredible and she's dominant. But she's not as dominant as the prices are sometimes. So I think she can break down, particularly on the forehand side and sometimes mentally as well. So I'm almost doing a 180 here in Swiatek purely because of the Nadal and Francisco Roig element. So look, let's see what the prices are. Is she favoured for the tournament? Is she underdog to Rybakina or to Goff based on, recent form and recent losses? But yeah, look, she's won this tournament twice. I think she's going to make it a hat-trick this time around, but we have to wait and see if she's going to be added to the betting recommendations or not. Moving on to the bottom half, you have Alexandrova and Svitolina as the seeds in quarter three. We spoke about Alexandrova. She's in horrific form. She lost again in round one in Linz as the second seed. We said to oppose her in Linz. We also said to oppose Samsonova. They were the two highest seeds in the bottom. Both of them went out in round one or early after their buys. So we're opposing Alexandrova again here. The only other name in with Svitolina that I think could be a threat, and it's not Badosa and it's not Eva Lees, I think Linda Noskova potentially. She's a player I rate highly, but she is just after playing on hard court in the Billie Jean King Cup, and that rules her out for me. I don't like the switch from hard court to clay in 1 week, where the other girls you're coming up against have had the advantage of not having to have that switch. So it's an easy swerve. And Svitolina also played on clay 1 match, I believe, and won in the Billie Jean King Cup. So I'm keen on Svitolina here. She's in good form. It's like been something of a renaissance for her in the last like kind of 12 to 18 months. So she is in good form and she is making the latter stages of these types of tournaments. So she's the one for me that wins that section. Hard to see past her towards anybody else. So let's see what the prices are there. And then in the bottom, you've got two names. You've got Coco Gauff as the 2 seed, and you've got Karolina Muchova as the 7 seed. Muchova is, one of my favorite players. Arguably my favorite player at the moment to watch. The only problem here is it's very like the Swiatek and Ostapenko situation. She's 0-6 in 6 attempts against Coco Gauff, and she's been drawn in the Coco Gauff section. So Gauff is rubbing her hands. Mukova's disgusted. I don't know if there's something mentally there or if it's just a stylistic kind of matchup thing. But even when Gauff has been coming in poor kind of form in the run up, she still managed to beat Mukova and turn it around. So it's not something I'd be desperate to bet Mukova. I think there are other chances to bet Mukova. We call it the Roland Garros price at plus 4,000. Certainly bet that. There's nobody else in this quarter unless a qualifier gets placed in there that might challenge. But both girls are coming in great form. Mukova's coming off a semi-final in Miami, and Gauff made it all the way to the final, and both of them are fresh from last week. So let's come back and revisit this one, but there are my thoughts. Swiatek will be very hard to beat. Svitolina will be the one in quarter 3, and then, you know, whether or not anyone can challenge Mukova and Gauff down in the bottom section. The last tournament of the week to preview briefly is a WTA 250 in Rouen in France. You have a couple of decent names here. It's obviously a weaker tournament. Let's go through it pretty quickly. Marta Kostyuk is the top seed in the first quarter, and the other seeded player in there is Ann Lee, who's, you know, kind of in a terrible run of form and lost again in round 1 last week. But there's there's one or two names that are interesting. I guess Daria Kasatkina is an interesting name here. The only problem is, despite being a former Roland Garros semi-finalist and a former Rome semi-finalist, she took a break like 2 months ago for injury and also for mental drain. It's hard for me to bet her, you know, coming back, complete unknown. She does have the game for clay. Kostyuk has been in good form. Kostyuk had a win on clay in the Billie Jean King Cup this week as well. She beat Magda Linette. She only played the one game, so she is coming in relatively fresh, and it was on clay. So I kind of like Kostyuk here. If I was to get a big price on Kasatkina, I'd be willing to take a go just because of, you know, her pedigree and how good she is on clay. So let's see. Second quarter is Haley Baptiste and Marketa Vondrousova with Anastasia Potapova as the kind of danger floating without the qualifiers being placed yet. So Vondrousova is arguably my all-time favourite female player, or certainly in the top 3 or 5 all-time favourite female players. She is a former French Open finalist. She is a Wimbledon champion. We were on her that year. She made the Roland Garros final at 100-1. She ended up losing, I believe, to Ash Barty in the end. I actually thought she'd win, but she was pretty soundly beaten in the final. But a class player. Again, like Kasatkina, she's coming back from injury. She hasn't played since Adelaide in singles. She played for the Czechs this week in the Billie Jean King Cup. 2 problems there. 1, she only played doubles, so they didn't use her in singles. And 2, it was on a hard court. So there are probably enough reasons there to swerve Vondrousova this week and look elsewhere. I would still take a flyer on her if there was a big price. We'll find out tomorrow, and we'll come back on that. But you know, pedigree-wise, she's up with it. She's the best player in this tournament on clay. The other names that I mentioned, Potapova is probably going to be a swerve. She's in the WTA Linz final tomorrow and has played a ton of matches this week. So do I really want her to travel to another tournament and play another bunch of matches and maybe be 10 matches in a row by the time she might make another final? I think fatigue plays in there. So Haley Baptiste is an interesting one to me. She made a quarterfinal in Miami, which is a really good result for a 1,000. But then she went to WTA Charleston on clay, and she had an awful round 1 loss to Renata Zarazua, the Mexican, who, you know, is not a great player. So that was a really bad loss for Baptiste. But Baptiste is probably, you know, someone I'd be willing to bet here if we were to get a price. We'll come back and examine that tomorrow, but she's certainly one I have my eye on. She has made a 4th round at Roland Garros, so not a complete stranger to clay. The bottom half is actually stronger. In the third quarter, you've got Elisabetta Ciocchiaretto, so an excellent, maybe excellent is hyperbolic, but she's certainly coming in form, and she has been a pretty good player over these last 6 months. So she's one I have my eye on. Jacqueline Christian is the other seed in here. And then you've got Sloane Stephens, a wild card, and you've got Katie Boulter. So 4 decent enough names here. You know, it'll be totally price dependent who we go with. Sloane Stephens is coming in. She is a winner here in 2024, and she actually looked okay in Linz. She played, I think it was Andreeva she went out to in the end, but she played her okay. It wasn't a walkover or a really lopsided game. So, you know, Sloane is a former French Open finalist on clay. She lost to Simona Halep. I think from a set and a break up, she lost to Simona Halep in that final. So she's a big name and coming back to a bit of form. Katie Boulter as well. She lost 7-6, 7-6 to Roos in WTA Linz, and Roos is in the made the semi-finals there and lost to Andreeva. So Bolter is a big enough hitter for an indoor tournament. Now, she's not a clay courter, but again, let's see the price. Christian and Chocoretto. Chocoretto for me is the big name here, and the one that I would see coming through. Price agnostic and not even thinking about price. So we'll come back to this one, but that's how I would see that section, as 4 relatively decent names, with Chocoretto the one that I think is most likely to come through it. And in the bottom, the name that stands out to me is Sorona Cirstea. She's the second seed. She looked really good this week in Linz. She lost to Andreeva. It was 3 sets, and I read Andreeva's quotes after it. She said, look, I'd practiced with Sorona before. She played a different level when we played a competitive match against each other. She was so aggressive. She ran her really tight. Andreeva had to really play her best stuff to get past Cirstea. So Cirstea for me is my favourite to win this tournament. I think she should be a shorter price than Kostyuk. It'll probably be quite close in the betting, but let's see. The bottom quarter is quite easy right now. The qualifiers still have to be placed, but the only one in there right now is Lily Tagger, who made a quarter final in Linz. I think that'll be very easy work for Cirstea. And then Janice Chen, but her form has been awful, and she's coming in on 5 consecutive losses and has never done anything on clay. So Cirstea is the one for me that I'm really keen to keep an eye on for prices here. There's a couple of names here: Baptiste, Kostyuk, Vondrousova, Chocoretto. Let's see what the prices are tomorrow, but it's a relatively evenly balanced tournament, evenly balanced draw. There are no draws really that I think this is, apart from Barcelona, where you have Alcaraz in the top, that you think there's going to be bad each way here. We mentioned Zverev as the 1 seed in Munich, but even at the bottom you've got Shelton, you've got Bublik, you've got Fonseca, there are decent names down in the bottom. I think Fils, Fils is in Barcelona. Fils in Barcelona, but let's keep an eye on it. Let's keep an eye on the each way. I don't want to harp on too much about each way, just because most of the listeners here are going to be in the US. Most of the books in the US don't do each way, but we will have other methods to bet and to get, to take advantage of any value that we see in the draws. Name the finalists, quarter winner to reach stage X. So we'll come back to that tomorrow. I will tag on here at the end of the pod. And as always, thanks for listening. I do appreciate support. This will always be free, hopefully fun for people to just listen at the start of the week and see if you want a few bets on the tennis. Like I said, we do post reels and shorts and stories throughout the week, so I will always post match stuff if there's any individual matches that I think have great prices. The only one I posted this week was Potapova to beat Tagger. That went off odds against, and she beat her easily, 7-6 love, so worth following along for that if nothing else. But also I will always chapter these pods, so you don't need to listen to it all. You can just skip straight to the betting part if that's what you want to do, or that's what you're most interested in. But the betting part here will be tomorrow. I will post it tomorrow once lines are out, and I'll just clip it on to the end, so it'll all be in one take, or one edited take. So looking forward to seeing you back here for that, and thanks for joining. And do please like and share this on your socials. I'd love to build up a following and get this thing going. Thanks for being here. Hello and welcome back to Inside the Draw. This is Sunday. We're a day later than we recorded yesterday. I did say I would come back. None of the books had betting up yesterday, and we do actually have betting lines today. Barcelona still remains without actual prices on any of the books, so we're going to have to go without Barcelona, unfortunately, and then mention it on stories and reels and Instagram and YouTube during the week. So do follow along, and I'll try to get something on some of those channels later today for Barcelona. But let's go through the other tournaments. I'll keep it quite brief. We obviously did a pretty substantial run through all of the events yesterday, so I'm not trying to repeat myself here. Before we do that, this morning we had the finals. Potapova lost to Mira Andreeva. She was, fairly soundly beaten. She won the first set 6-1, so if there was anyone betting her at plus 5,000 or plus 3,300 last week, there was a nice chance to get out there for some nice profit if you weren't on each way. But she was a success for the pod here last week. And then Sinner took care of business pretty easily, to be honest, in Monte Carlo. I think what's apparent, having watched some of that match this morning, is that Sinner has stepped it up a bit, particularly on serve, and Alcaraz has a bit of work to do to match him. I still maintain that Sinner, was not the right side of the draw. He was not the right bet at the start of the week. He did end up, money came for him to beat Alcaraz. They went up basically a pick, and money came for Sinner, which is fair enough. And I think if they were priced again in Madrid or in Rome or even in Roland Garros, as of right now, Sinner would be, minus 140 or something. But yeah, look, I'm sure Alcaraz will find his legs. He has a bit of time to come and get ready, but that would be a pretty disappointing tournament for him. Having been on clay a week before Sinner was, and having got the fresher side of the draw, the easier side of the draw. But fair play to Sinner and hat tip, and he looked great doing it. So let's move on quickly here and go through them. The first one I'm going to look at is Stuttgart. It's the best tournament we've got here, and the one that I have the best bets in right now. We have, I think the market has priced up Rybakina a little short. Rybakina is like plus 200 favorite here. My favorite bet, and I have three. My favorite bet is Coco Gauff at plus 900. DraftKings and 365 both have her around that price, plus 900, which is beautiful. And if you can get it each way, do. And then FanDuel are about half that price, and I think FanDuel are correct. So shop around. It's always worthwhile shopping around for these, but plus 900 on Gauff is lovely. She's in with Mukova in the quarter, but she's got that 6-0 head to head over Mukova, so I'm not too worried there. And she's plus 150 for her quarter, so plus 150, 6-4 to win quarter 4 as well. Also very worthwhile in taking that. I think it should be odds on to win the quarter. Two other bets, one at the top of the field. Swiatek is plus 300. I just really like her with this angle with Francisco Ruiz and Nadal, and hitting with Rafa at the Nadal Academy all week. I think she's going to come in completely reinvigorated and ready to go and hit the ground running, and I expect a lot of good stuff from Swiatek this week at a tournament she's won before. And then my other bet is going to be Elena Ostapenko at plus 5,000, so 50-1, and that would be one for small stakes just to take each way if you can, and hope she gets past the fatigued Mira Andreeva in round 1. But Ostapenko on her day, she doesn't need anyone to be fatigued. She can beat anyone out in her own right, particularly on an indoor court. So let's see what we get there. But Gauff is actually the favourite bet of the week at plus 900. We will, given there's no Barcelona up, let's stay with the women for a moment and move on to WTA Rouen. A little bit annoying here. I had Katie Boulter marked down at plus 3,300, so beautiful price on Boulter, I thought. And as I was about to record, 365 have gone to 20-1, so plus 2,000, and I'm not going to bet her at that. So all we have here are a couple of long shots. I think the market is too short on the favourites, so I've no interest on Sarona Kirstea or Marta Kostyuk at the prices that they're up at. They're both like about plus 300 or even shorter. So Jinyu Wang, who came through qualifiers at plus 3,300, I'd take a flyer on her and maybe back it each way. And then the other two are really long shots. Diane Parry at plus 15,000 and Sloane Stephens at plus 25,000. So 150-1 and 250-1. Both those players on their day can be dangerous. Sloane showed some signs last week against Mira Andreeva. She's won this title 2 years ago. She really needs to play herself into form. Do I think she's going to win it? No. But do I think she has a better than 1 in 250 chance? And I would say yes. So I'll bet all three of those each way and keep the stakes pretty small. I certainly prefer the Gauff bet over in Stuttgart. And then briefly moving on to ATP Munich, and it's unfortunately a similar theme here where I think the favourites are too short. I think Shelton is arguably a touch too short when he's in with Fonseca. Both of those are about plus 800. And then I think Zverev is a little short as well. He's about plus 200. And like I said yesterday, I'm just not sure he's going to be bought in. So a couple of ones that I'm going to take them on with. Alexander Bublik plus 1,400. So Sasha Bublik at 14-1 with FanDuel. Stefanos Tsitsipas at plus 2,500, also with FanDuel. Look, Tsitsipas' best days are arguably behind him, but this is a surface that he's done his best work on over the years. He wasn't a million miles away from Cerundolo and Monte Carlo, and Cerundolo is like 8-1 here. Tsitsipas lost 7-5, 6-4, I think. But he's won this title as well, and I think it doesn't take a lot to turn something around in a field like this, particularly if Zverev kind of downs tools early. And then the other two are both plus 5,000 shots. So 50-1 for Alejandro Tabilo and also 50-1 for Botic van de Zandschulp. Tabilo won a title down, I think he won Rio down in South America and Brazil 6 weeks ago. And Botic van de Zandschulp has been to the final here, I think, twice. And played okay. Like I said yesterday, he ran Navone pretty close, who won the title in Bucharest a week ago. So those are my bets there. So we're looking at a long shot kind of situation in Munich and in Rouen, and then Stuttgart. That's where I'm going to have most of my stakes. I like Swiatek at plus 300, and I also like Gauff at plus 900. And in an ideal situation, they'd be meeting each other in the final. So let's hope that's what transpires. Nothing for Barcelona. I'm not going to post again, so on this pod format. So we are going to go with stories and reels. So check out Instagram, check out YouTube, check out whatever for those during the week. I will be keeping an eye out for Rafael Hodar down in Barcelona and hoping that you get a price plus 5,000, plus 6,000, something like that down there for him, and then hoping you get maybe plus 2,500 for Arthur Fils or something, you know, in with Musetti. I don't think we'll get the sniff of it, but if you did, that would be an immediate bet. I think Musetti should probably still be a favourite in that quarter, but Fils is going to be pretty close to him in the betting for me. And I think Alcaraz is just going to be really short. They'll have him like minus 200 or something, and you know, I've got no interest at that price. So let's see. Keep an eye out on the socials. As always, thanks for following. Thanks for listening. Please do share around. I'd appreciate it. Looking for as much following and support as we can get. Thanks, and see you next week.